From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. This is Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget the Junior. It's very important to remember the JR. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, and review. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. And today we got another banger for you on this Friday. Off weekend for the Saints, but it's given us a chance to kind of evaluate what's happened this season. There's been a whole lot of twists and a whole lot of turns. I don't know about you, Andre, but I'm feeling pretty good on this Friday. How are you?
I'm feeling real good on this Friday. You know, it's been a long week, but an easier week since the Saints haven't been, doing a lot of the media that they would normally do. We've got some high school football playoffs tonight, Sean. It's going to be a good day.
Yeah, the high school football playoffs get rolling here in the month of November. Always a fun month when you talk about high school, college, pros, everything. And the Saints get the weekend off, which means yours truly will have the weekend off. So I'm going to enjoy a couple days off as well. All right, so today, Friday, a little bit more of a relaxed week as we have mentioned. And then in our previous pods, we talked about, the Taysom factor. We handed out some bye week awards.
Yeah.
But one player we haven't talked about yet, and it's kind of funny because I felt like we talked about him all the time last year, is Derek Carr. And I thought this was a good time to touch on or to discuss Saints QB1, number 4, Derek Carr, because he was such a hot topic a season ago. And he didn't come up in the award section. He didn't come up in the post-Browns victory when we were talking about what happened in that game. But he's been important to this season, so I think that's where we wanted to go with the big picture.
Yeah, the Saints have had so many other things going on. We haven't really touched on Derek Carr, but Derek Carr, when asked, he said that he feels like he's playing some of the best football of his career. So as we look at Derek Carr and the 8 games that he's played so far as we head into this bye week, how do you evaluate Derek Carr's play so far?
All right. Got a lot here. So that's what we do, and we understand that this is usually a topic that generates a lot of interest, even though he didn't come up much this offseason, or this season, I should say. We have to talk about Derek Carr. It's the bye week. He's a starting quarterback, and he's such an important topic, such an important player, and he seems to just strike quite the strong reaction from those that usually listen and watch this podcast. It's funny, he was such a hot-button topic a season ago. It felt like after every single game, we were breaking down something that happened with Derek Carr, some kind of reaction, some kind of something, whether it was a former wide receiver, something he did in the game, how the game went, whether he was doing good, whether he was doing bad. It was always something, it felt like, with Derek Carr. This year just felt like it's been drama-free for the most part. Kind of felt like he's flown somewhat under the radar, with the exception of a former wide receiver going off on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. I'm not even going there. Like, it's just not even worth it. At least as much as a starting quarterback can fly under the radar with the way the fan base seems, especially over the past, at least the people that came to us with their reactions. I don't know about the entire fan base. It felt like there was a higher percentage of those, at least last year, that did not like him. Like we said before, there isn't quite the drama surrounding him as there was a season ago. Although, make no mistake, we're going to check the comments at this podcast, and I can promise you, he still triggers a reaction. But with everything going on this season, he just hasn't been the main concern. And that's where I want to go with my opinion on Derek Carr. Derek Carr has been fine. He's been good. That's the adjective I would describe his season and his play thus far. Entire play thus far during the stretch with the Saints. Good. Not to be confused with great or elite, but certainly not also to be confused with average or bad. I don't know about his entire career. I really don't. Because I'm not going to go through each season of his career and judge him. I can only judge his stretch here in New Orleans that's fresh in our minds and the stuff that we watch every single week meticulously. And during that 25-game sample, I think we can confidently say Carr is a good, capable, competent starter in the NFL. This season has been better than last season. It's just a fact. This season better than last season. And this next statement might Might trigger some of y'all. Might hurt some of y'all's feelings, so get your tissue ready. Since Drew Brees retired, the Saints have started Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill, Trevor Siemian, Ian Book, Andy Dalton, Spencer Rattler,
good times,
and Derek Carr. Okay, sorry if this hurts some of y'all, but Carr is the best one since Drew. He's the best one since Drew. That is just a fact. Just because he's the best one since Drew doesn't mean that he is Drew. He isn't Drew. He's not the multiplier Drew is. His presence will not overcome multiple deficiencies elsewhere and other areas consistently enough to win games. He needs more around him to be successful. That is just a fact. That is just being as fair and objective as I can be about Derek Carr. But his presence does matter. His presence does matter. He makes a difference. And we've got two very recent examples that illustrate just that. Look at the game the Saints just played. Last year, it wasn't just that some of y'all didn't like Carr. It's that a lot of y'all thought Jameis was better. Jameis Winston played good Sunday. We've said it. Almost 400 yards. He played pretty good, and he avoided the big mistake, although there were a couple of risky throws in there. And there's not an insane gap between Derek Carr and Jameis Winston, but I thought it was pretty obvious who the better quarterback was, who operated better for their team. Put it this way. No one in the Saints organization came away from that game saying, you know what? Maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we had the right guy in the building all along, and we should have kept Jameis. I can guarantee you no one is saying that inside the Saints organization. Some may still say that in the Saints fan base, but this is nowhere near the reality inside the Saints organization. Then the other big example came in weeks 6, 7, and 8. Carr was out. Rattler was in. A lot of people, I mean, look, Spencer Rattler was the social media star for the Saints.
All the comments we got
it
on
was
Rattler.
Everything. Pro Spencer Rattler. He's the future.
QB1.
They jumped from rookie making his first start to the next franchise savior, Spencer Rattler.
Good times.
The Rattler train was as big as the Jameis train, the Rattler bandwagon. Guess what? That 3-game stretch was painful to watch. That's just facts, guys. It was painful to watch. It was not good. It wasn't even below average or average. It was bad. Overall, bad. Bad stretch of football. The offense became anemic. Rattler wasn't ready. He may never be ready. He may eventually get there. We don't know. But right here, right now, we can confidently say Carr is better than Rattler by a huge margin. And those 3 games he was out cost the Saints dearly, because had they had him for those 3 games, I could see myself or talk myself into them winning at least one of those and maybe 2 of those games. As for his actual play on the field this season, he's played 8 games. His numbers are good. Numbers are fine. 68.7. That's completion percentage. That's 8th in the league.
Yep.
13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, no multi-interception games. 106 rating. That's 4th in the league. That was higher than I thought. 106, high. That's 4th in the league. 62.1 QBR rating, quarterback rating. It's all a little dicey, but that's a 1 to 100 scale. That's 8th in the league. Again, not bad. Plus, I thought he outplayed the opposing quarterbacks he faced in 5 of the 8 starts that he played. 4 wins in the first Atlanta game. That loss. I didn't think Cousins outplayed Carr, especially where that game went with the fluky interception. Maybe he deserves blame for the interceptions, no doubt about that. But they had the fluky Rashid Shaheed punt return, muff into the end zone. All that to say, Carr has not been the problem, especially this year. However, here is where I will give a lot of y'all in the comments that don't like him some credence. Okay. I will give you this olive branch, if you will. Is that even the right way to say that? I don't know.
We'll find out.
Results are results. Results are results. And fair or unfair, we tie wins and losses in the NFL to only 2 people. Only 2 people. It is the head coach and the quarterback. Wins and losses, head coach, quarterback. That record gets attached to them more than you don't ever say, well, that starting center is 20-10 as a center. It just doesn't happen.
Some people say you got to look past the results.
That's good. You caught me there. Carr is 13-12 in a season and a half here. 13-12. Not terrible. But 13-12 is 13-12. That's not exactly what they paid for when they brought him aboard. They brought him here to be a playoff quarterback, a quarterback capable of lifting this organization out of mediocrity and into being a consistent playoff team. Similar, maybe not to the same level, but similar to what Stafford did in L.A. when, he was in this bad situation. Detroit went to L.A., ironically played Matt Stafford when he got out of the break. And until he does that, and I will give you guys this, until he does that, I think a portion of the fan base will remain out on Derek Carr. That's where I stand up with Derek Carr right now.
I agree. I mean, ultimately, I think that's what a lot of people in the fan base are waiting for. But when you do look at this season as a whole so far, he's played well. I mean, I can not criticize Derek Carr very much. I mean, you mentioned he's 4th in passer rating, 8th in QBR, 13 passing touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 14 total touchdowns if you count the QB sneak he had against the Cowboys.
The Michael Jackson one? The Michael Jackson one?
Michael Jackson
Okay.
celebration. So 14 total touchdowns to 4 interceptions. He's thrown for 1,742 yards. And by the way, it's worth mentioning, he's not 4-7. The Saints are 4-7.
Right.
Derek Carr as a starting quarterback is 4-4.
Right.
You could argue if he plays those 3 games, I think they're at least 5-6. They could be 6-4. 6-4 would have them sitting in a tie for first place in the NFC South. That's how well Derek Carr has played this season. And on top of that, you mentioned weeks 6, 7, and 8. I'm going to mention weeks 3 and 4. Derek Carr played well enough to win games against Philadelphia when he led the team on what should have been a game-winning drive and took the lead late in week 3 against the Eagles. The defense gave up that big pass and catch to Dallas Goedert and the eventual Saquon Barkley rushing touchdown. He had the Saints with the lead late against the Falcons before Paulson Adebo commits the pass interference and Younghoe Koo hits the longest field goal of his career. Derek Carr played well enough to have this team at 4-0 at one point. Then he gets injured, and since he's come back, 753 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. And by the way, I looked this up again because I looked it up before he came back. I looked it up again. He is still, by percentage, the most blitzed quarterback in the NFL. He's only been sacked 7 times.
That's good.
Because in this offense, Clint Kubiak has him getting the ball out very quick. When he gets pressured, he's the 3rd best in the league when it comes to getting the ball out and the time it takes to get the ball out. And, oh, by the way, when you add context, I know on the surface maybe 17, 42, and 14 touchdowns doesn't sound world-beating. It's not what Burrow's doing, Lamar's doing, and all of that.
Right.
But he is missing pretty much every wide receiver he went to training camp with.
Exactly.
Chris Olave may not play again this year. Rashid Shaheed is not going to play again this year. Cedric Wilson has been in and out the lineup, and when he's been in the lineup, he hasn't been on the field. Equanimous St. Brown, who we went to training camp with, he's gone. A.T. Perry, who we went to training camp with, is not here. He's in Denver. He's gone. Mason Tipton hasn't exactly been what they hoped he would be, and he missed last game. Bub Means, he's been gone the last few games. So Derek Carr is going out there with a group of receivers that are, I mean, not to talk down on the receivers because they've actually been playing well.
Some are being upgraded.
Right,
Sometimes,
exactly. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who was just signed a few weeks ago. Dante Pettis, who kind of came out of nowhere. He's making Alvin Kamara, he's targeting AK a lot. He's having to go to his tight ends and Jawan and Foster and Taysom even more. So Derek has had, a lot of shifting when you look at the weaponry that he's been given with this Saints team, and he's consistently managed to make it work. He's 4-4. He's playing efficient football. The passer rating shows it. The quarterback rating shows it. The touchdown to interception rating shows it. And he's doing it without all of his receivers and a patchwork offensive line.
Yeah.
So I think just for that, he does deserve credit.
It's funny. They always say the quarterback gets too much blame, but also too much credit. I don't think getting credit has been too much. I don't think he's gotten too much credit this year. He's actually played pretty clean, pretty smooth. But you haven't seen the onslaught of how great Derek Carr has been. When he's been bad or average, you've seen the onslaught of how terrible that they feel like he's been. So it's been a little bit off target or off balance with the criticism to praise when it comes to Derek Carr. I think at the end of the day, I think he's been exactly what they thought he would be in this system. He's pretty smooth and efficient in the play action game. When he has protection or when he's got to roll out, he's gotten a little bit better, I feel like, on the rollout game. He's reading the field well when he rolls out. DeMario Davis called him the true point guard, the Rajon Rondo. I think there's that's generally what you like your quarterbacks to be. He's even run a bit. They had that intentional rollout in the game against the Browns where he said the over-under was 6 yards. That's why he dove forward to get the, I guess it was 7 or 8 yards, whatever it was. I think all in all, and given how there hasn't been a whole lot of chatter in the fan base about Carr ever since the last time we heard anything was the Chris Olave situation and, a former wide receiver. I think it's been pretty tame around him over the last couple of weeks. I think that's a pretty good sign that most people understand that he ain't the problem. And, frankly, if he can kind of stay this way and they can figure out this formula during the final third of the season, the final 6 games, I think he's a guy that can possibly lead them to, what do you think, a few more wins down the stretch? I mean, I said on Fox 8 Overtime last night, I said, and we were asked, how did they finish this thing out? And I said, I could see him winning 4 out of the next 6. And if that's the case, what are they? 8 and 9 at that point?
Yeah.
So, and we'll see what the organization does. They finish off on that note because I do think there's a part of them that wants them to finish successful because I think they don't want to. They want to feel like they had some pieces in place to be successful this season. And had they not got any injuries, it would have done just that. I think that's probably how they would sell that. I don't know if that's the proper way to approach things in the organization once the offseason gets here, but I do think there is a little bit of that hope inside the organization that maybe they can make a run here down the stretch. So that's where I stand with Derek Carr. That's where his present is, but we got to talk about his future as well.
Definitely, because Derek Carr only has so many years left on that contract, and it was just a few weeks ago when fans were saying, hey, the Saints right now have the number 3 pick in the draft. Maybe we tank and draft one of those quarterbacks. Maybe you look in the free agency and see who's possible to bring them in next. So when it comes to Derek Carr's future here in New Orleans, how do you view that?
I think the next 6 games are going to determine a lot. If he can play this way, especially since he's got back from that injury, call it the second half of Carolina on, and he plays that way, I think that will certainly help. I think we also, as good as he's been this year, and again, I will emphasize that word, good, I think there has to be a big picture, realistic discussion about where his ceiling truly is. I think he's a player good enough to lead you to the playoffs if he has enough pieces around him. I don't know if he's a Super Bowl quarterback. I mean, we've got 11 years or 10 years of data now, so it's not like he's got a small sample size. I don't know if he's ever going to be someone you could say, yeah, we're going to ride all the way to the Super Bowl with that guy. I do think the realistic option or the realistic goal of getting into a playoff game with him is certainly something that they could. That's not unrealistic to think that's where his ceiling could be. That's fine, but obviously organizations want higher ceilings than that. They want higher aspirations than that. And I don't know where they truly see his ceiling being, but I do know at some point they will have a realistic discussion. It'll probably be they will have one this offseason, regardless of how he finishes out, about life after Derek Carr. When that is, will be the big discussion because the contract is set up in a way where he's got a $30 million base salary, like a $51 million cap hit. And if you just say, you know what, we're done, we're going to cut him, you don't get a whole bunch of cap space. What happens in that situation, if they were to just cut him, you'd only get like $1 million in cap space. So you would be walking away and you're not getting this huge chunk of cap savings and you're already $62 million. And I would only go from 62 to 61 by getting rid of a guy like Derek Carr. So what I realistically think is going to happen, I think Carr's back. I think Carr's back under some sort of adjusted contract, whether that's a restructure, whether that's a roster bonus conversion into a signing bonus, because you can get a huge chunk of salary cap space by restructuring Derek Carr's $30 million base salary. You probably get something like $23, $24 million in cap space, which would deduct from the 62 that they're already over. I know it's a lot of math, and I hate doing this with you guys because it's a lot to explain. But I think And that's the kind of stuff that's gotten them in trouble with cap stuff and getting older and older and aging veterans on your roster and a lot of dead money owed. But I do think, given where they're at, I think that's the most realistic option. The question I would have, and it depends on where they end up in the draft. Could you draft the future with Derek Carr still in place? Because I feel like that's the proper plan of attack. It's not, let's get rid of Carr and let's draft the future and have this rookie start from day one. I am of the belief that Carr is still capable of being competent, whatever, and whoever the next guy is, whether this year, next year, whatever the case may be, maybe gets a redshirt year under Carr, and then you move on from that way. But I think he's back in 2025. I really do.
I agree. I think he's back as well. The problem is when you look at right now, if the season ended today, we know it doesn't, but hypothetically, the Saints would have the 10th pick in the NFL draft.
Exactly.
That's not going to be good enough to get you Shedeur Sanders, who's probably going to be the number 1 quarterback. It's probably not going to be good enough to get you Cam Ward from Miami, who's probably going to be the number 2 quarterback, especially when you look at some of the teams that are before the Saints, like the Browns, like the Titans, like the Giants, like the Panthers, like the Jets, teams that could look to go in the direction of a younger quarterback. It's unlikely the Saints, and both of us expect the Saints to win some more this year.
Exactly.
I had them finishing at 6-11. You had them at 7-10. They could finish 8-9.
They really could.
And just 2 years ago, 8-9 made the playoffs in the NFC South. It won the NFC South. So if the Saints continue their winning ways, picking a quarterback early in the draft isn't necessarily going to be a reality for them. And do you even like a lot of those quarterbacks? Who's the guy?
Exactly. This isn't the 2024 draft class. We had 6 surefire first-rounders. They all went in the top 13, 14 picks. You get from Shedeur, and look, we're going to get much more into the quarterback stuff because there's going to be a guy that shoots up draft boards late. But right now, I mean, I check it almost every day. Just a few of the sites that I trust. It's Shedeur and Cam Ward, 1 and 1A, however you want to do it, however you want to flip it. And then there's a nice gap between the next guy. And the next guy, there's no consensus.
Carson
there's
Beck.
Ewers, there's Beck. I'm not a Jalen Milroe guy. I think I don't like him as much of a passer. There's like Jackson Dart, Drew Aller. I don't know where Nuss is at in that mix right now, depending on how he finishes out. So if you're like 7-10 or even 6-11, you're probably picking like 10th. Are you drafting your future franchise at 10 if the grade between your top 2 guys on your board drops that much? That's how franchises really get in trouble. And that's where we don't know, and we don't know where it's going to be once they start that pre-draft process. But I think you and I are in agreement because if they do the post-June 1st cut, yeah, you save more money, but you don't get that space till June 1st. And so you don't get to spend the money when the free agents are available, which is what you would want to get under the salary cap for. I mean, good luck starting your free agent spending in June. I mean, good luck. See what's available then. So I think that people get caught in that post-June 1st thing. You only do that if you don't need the money right away. And the Saints need the money right away. And I've looked at their books. I think their biggest, the best way or the biggest thing that's going to come off the books would be with the Carr restructure, which I know, and I'm with you. I'm not a huge fan of that because I think they've gotten caught in this cycle, and maybe they can avoid some other guys. But I think the way that contract is set up, I think it was set up for them to possibly restructure after year number 3. So I think Derek Carr, the best thing that can happen, keeps playing well because then it becomes easier to keep him on your books next year and keep him around next year. Where you think, you know what? This guy is capable, and then we'll start to look to the future. I will also say this. Life after Carr, whenever that begins, you've got to, as a franchise, believe in someone coming out in the draft. That is the only thing you have not done as a franchise. At some point, you've got to target a guy in the first round, and you go get that player. Because I think the veteran free agent, projects with Taysom Hill and all that stuff, I don't think that's going to work.
And that's why I don't think this is the year to draft a quarterback. Outside of the fact that I'm not necessarily crazy about any of the guys that the Saints would pick, the Saints aren't a quarterback away.
Right, exactly.
When you start looking at life after Carr, you're probably going to be thinking about life after Kamara as well. You've got so many places to address on this team when it comes to depth, when it comes to starters, receiver, tight end, offensive line, running back, different positions on the defense. This is not a team where you can just draft a young stud at quarterback and it's like, oh, okay, they're a playoff team again. Like that's like what Washington did, what Chicago was trying to do with Caleb Williams. Like the Saints are going to take some time and they're going to take some work. So I think Derek Carr should stay on the roster because I think that he's the best option you've got right now, and you should try to make the bed for the quarterback that you're eventually going to take to put in it. You should try to build up that depth, build up some young pieces so that when you take a quarterback in, say, 2 or 3 years, that quarterback can come in and have an immediate impact.
And make no mistake, and don't forget about this. I mean, you drafted quarterbacks your last 2 years. We talked about one a few minutes ago that y'all were very high on, and I know the organization's high on Jake Haener, and it was a little interesting, the dynamic, because Rattler's now back to third string and Hayner's back to second string. But if if Carr were to go down, who would they turn to next? But I do think they like both of those young guys, and there's a situation where you could just see them saying, you know what? We're just gonna stand pat at quarterback. We're just gonna keep our room the way it is and let those two young guys develop and let Carr be the seasoned veteran that he is, and maybe next year they'll be a little bit better. And who knows the situation that would play itself out at the game's most important position. We got about a minute and a half left. Anything else before we get out of here? I was thinking when they come back, the LA Rams game. The Rams play on Sunday night this week. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So pay attention to that game, because obviously that's going to matter when the Saints come out of their bye week. So they're getting the Rams on a late kickoff, coming off of a late kickoff, and you get them coming off of a bye week. So that sets up okay for the Saints.
That'll be a big test for this Saints defense, because that Rams offense has some players, from Kyron Williams and the way that he can run the ball to Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, who are finally reunited and back together. Man, that's a tough team to defend. Matthew Stafford, the ultimate field general and point guard, like we mentioned earlier. So, this defense, they're going to get tested on Sunday. But if they can beat the Rams, that might change a lot of people's thinking on where this team can go.
There are two games. If they can somehow beat the Rams, and if the Monday night game against Green Bay stays Monday night, and if they can win that game, I think you're going to really start to hear the Rizzy chatter louder and louder and louder about getting that job once the season ends. All right, we're going to wrap things up here a couple seconds early. For Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende. We will catch you guys next time on Overtime.